Good morning, everyone. This is Kathy Mason from MasonWorks Marketing here on Conscious Business Zone with my friend Diane Corcoran. Hi, Diane.
Hi, Kathy.
I'm so
Good
excited.
to see you.
Yeah, I'm so excited to talk to you. I find what you're doing is just fascinating and so important to the well-being of our society in general. So, Diane, you have been a past president of IANDS, which is the International Association for Near-Death Studies. You're a retired Army colonel. You were a nurse in the Army. And so you definitely are key for organization, I'm sure. and that we were very lucky to have you as president and organize everything. So Diane, how did you get interested in near-death experience?
Well, Kathy, this has been a long journey. I was a very young nurse in Vietnam. I had just gotten out of nursing school, went to basic training, and went to Vietnam. And during that time, I was sitting with a patient in the ICU, pre-op and recovery, and they had a young man in there who had been injured. And in the middle of the night, he called me over to his bed and he said, "I need to tell you something, but you have to promise to believe me."
Oh.
And I thought, okay. And so he started telling me about this experience he had when he was shot. He said, "My spirit raised out of my body. I could see myself shot in the rice paddy. And all of a sudden I had no pain and I'm looking around and I could see other spirits. And I went up and all of a sudden he starts crying. And he said, and then I went up to this beautiful place. I was in the light. I felt like I'd never been loved like this before. And I'm trying to figure out, am I dead? What's going on here?" And he said it was, beautiful colors. And then some voice said to him, "You have to go back. It's not your time." And all of a sudden, he was being thrown into the helicopter. And at that point, he said, "I went back into my body and it was painful and awful." And he said, "Do you think I'm crazy?"
Oh.
And of course, I had this 1969, I had no idea what he was talking about. And honest to God, I think words just came to me because I said, "No, I don't think you're crazy. I think you were given a beautiful gift and you'll learn more about it later and it'll be helpful in your life." And I just went on about that. And he seemed to feel comforted. And that was, of course, my goal. But that sort of was like a vaccination for me because I thought nobody should ever have to have something like that and not have somebody to support them.
Right. And
so when I came back to the United States, I started giving workshops. And remember, there wasn't one book, one article, one nothing. And I was out there talking about it. And honest to God, I was still in the Army. I'm sure they thought I was crazy because every place I went to, I would start talking about this. And of course, then in 1975, Raymond Moody wrote his book, Life After Life. And all of a sudden we have a name for it, near-death experiences. So then, of course, it gave more credence to the experience. But I've been doing this 50 years plus now.
Wow.
Teaching universities, professional groups, all kinds of hospitals, domestic and international. And we have some people, nurses get it. They've seen it, they've heard it. Doctors, not so much. But we're still seeking this goal of having people in every hospital trained to support these people, and even outside is why I did it, so people could call me, because over 50% of these experiences happen during accidents or drowning, with kids especially. So they never go to the hospital, and they wonder, and it's such a personal thing. I did a talk in Fargo one time in the middle of nowhere. And the organizers said, well, how many people do you think will come? They were concerned about how many cookies to buy. And I said, I have no idea. How many do you usually have? And they said 30 to 50. I said, okay. Well, 250 people showed up.
Wow.
A mother and daughter who had never told each other that they had both had these experiences. So, you know, then people, of course, came up to me and what do I think and what should I do? And the solution is so easy. It's just information, just support them, just listen to them. And I used to carry little notebooks with a lot of information and would give them out to people so they'd have some resources. Now there's so much stuff, YouTube. You know, I have a web page that they can go to that's very specific for the military. And I've just been doing it ever since, and we've made some headway, but not what I'd like to see. I'd like to see it in school curriculums, nursing school curriculums. I'd like to see somebody in every hospital be an expert so they could be helpful. So that's how I got started, and I'm still on my journey.
Well, the thing is, it's interesting that you didn't have a near-death experience, but then you somehow made it your life's work to help those that have. Did you have a spiritually transformative experience that drove you? Because the understanding is very similar.
Yeah, I actually did have a near-death experience, I think, as a child. I almost bled to death after I had my tonsils out. And I remember nothing about the experience. I was told that by a wise old spirit. But I did have a lot of the after effects, but I didn't think anything about it because I just thought everybody was that way. And so, but as I grew up and I realized that, you know, a lot of these after effects are not everybody's like that. And so that's when I finally sought some confirmation. And I've actually thought about getting hypnotized to go back to the actual time to see what the experience was.
Or even a past life regression to find out, because I'll bet you there's something, the way that you've taken it up as your life's work. In between doing nursing and running as a colonel, you had huge responsibilities as a woman, as a colonel.
Yeah, I was the only female colonel in the situation at Frankfurt. I was at there was one other, and so yes, we had, and every place I went during Desert Storm, I organized classes for all the medical people on NDEs. I figured, you know, there would be a lot of people in combat. 50% of our combat vets have NDEs. Wow. So that's a lot of people walking around with these experiences and not having the support they should have.
Right. So when you're using the term near-death experience, would you mind explaining that for the audience in case they're wanting to know what that means? We've had some people on talk about theirs, but everyone seems to be so unique. There are some some
characteristics.
characteristics that are similar. Could you talk
Yeah,
about that?
sure. It's a a spiritual experience that happens during an accident, during surgery, during drowning, electrocution. It could be a number of different things, surgery, labor and delivery, where you feel like you've come out of your body and you have certain characteristics. You see departed loved ones. You may see a spiritual or religious figure. Many people talk about going into the light that is this bright, bright light that feels like total unconditional love. And they will see other people, other spirits. They see different colors that don't exist here. They hear music that doesn't exist here. Children sometimes talk about the light beings that are there, and they're frequently told that they can't stay there because it's not their time. That we all agreed prior to birth to have a specific life and lessons, a course which we don't always remember. And so there are many, many characteristics like that that make it very difficult for people to understand what's happening to them. Now it's more of an everyday word, so I would hope they might, and they can look it up, you know, you can go to YouTube, but the after effects of near-death experiences are important. You become less materialistic, more affectionate, and that's an issue for men because at meetings, you'll see men hug each other, which you ordinarily don't see. They really become, children become very bright, really intelligent, large vocabularies. It's sort of like sending a 5-year-old in and getting a 35-year-old out.
Wow.
And yeah, and sometimes gifts, they're given gifts of healing or psychic ability. They're really extraordinary people, very affectionate and caring, very thoughtful, not so crazy about money anymore, which is a big deal for husbands or wives who planned on having a 3-house, 2-boat lifestyle. And then one of them has a near-death experience and they want to go sit on the beach and write poetry. And that doesn't always work out so great for some people. But there are significant after effects, and they're all listed in my article on my webpage also, or any place you go on IANDS, you can find some of the rest of them.
Well, I think that it's there's this spontaneous mystical experience, and then people see a bigger viewpoint of their existence, and that's why they come back. But in the military, if you're trained to fight and kill, and then you have this experience and can't come back and do your job anymore, what happens then?
Oh, it's significant. I had people call me. I remember a young man who was a commander of a dental unit. He was a West Point graduate, and he'd seen an article. And so he called me and he said, I had this experience, but now he said, I can't discipline these young men and women. I just want to hug them and tell them they're going to be okay. And I said, that's not going to work out too well in the military. And so it is hard for them, hard for priests, because, you know, they find out that religion is not what everybody thinks it is. What they find out, it's all about forgiveness. It's about caring. There's not all these laws and rules. And so what does a priest do? How does he go on teaching? And he said, I don't know what to do. So it is hard for them. In the military, it's a very closed environment, and they cannot tell their commander. They might lose their security clearance. You know, their friends are going to think they're crazy. So it was hard. I used to spend time in the military talking to them about this, or if it isn't something that people need therapy for, but they do need somebody who's knowledgeable, who can help them. And I used to do that individually with people without really telling people what was going on, because they don't need an interpretation. They don't need a religious lecture. They just want to know they're okay, this is normal, and support them with some information. And it would be a big problem in the military, especially since so many more have experiences. And I really want to see military hospitals take this on and get people trained. I always trained everybody that I had access to in the military, but once again, you know, time's gone by. I haven't been there in 20 years, and people just aren't doing it.
Well, you're still making a big impact what you're doing, but you're not inside the gates. You're doing it screaming for help. So could you explain to the audience how different this is than PTSD? Because everyone thinks about, oh yeah, well, they've just had a unusual experience. They've had PTSD. It's a trauma. Well, you had a trauma to your body, but the mystical experience is something quite different.
Personally, I think this contributes, NDE contributes to the service member suicide rate.
Yeah.
They have physical trauma, they have psychological trauma, and then they have this mystical experience that they can't explain, and nobody can help them. I know a soldier who was shot and ended up at Walter Reed, tried to tell them about his near-death experience because he didn't understand what it was about. And they just said, don't tell us about that. Don't talk to us about that. Another soldier had felt the love and condition of the light, and then was told he had to come back. So he sort of felt like he got kicked out of heaven, because many of these people don't want to come back. They just want to stay there. And so he went to his priest, and the priest just got up and turned around and walked away.
Oh no.
So he was devastated again by the system that should have been there to support them. And so in the military, it makes it really hard. And you know, I think there's so many things we could do, because this is a big problem. You know, think of 50% of Vietnam vets, Desert Storm vets, you know, Kuwait, all the different places that we've had soldiers in trauma. And really, the spiritual event is a beautiful thing that happens, and all they need is a little information to be able to accept it and not think that they're crazy.
Yeah, I think the other part of this that you mentioned quickly is that the misdiagnosis, if they think they have PTSD and they're giving them drugs and talk therapy, is and you said that you identified that it could be part of the cause of the high suicide rate.
Right. It's a real problem, because in the VA, I actually went to the VA. This was many years ago, but I went to the chief of psychiatry and said, how would you differentiate a psychotic break of a young person and a near-death experience? They come in, they said, I saw God. I talked to my deceased parents. And the answer I got was, what's a near-death
Oh,
experience?
yeah.
So, you know, and unfortunately, a lot of times they do exactly that. They put them on drugs, they throw them into a PTSD group, which is the absolute wrong thing to do. And I had a young guy come into the IANDS office one time, and he just had a near-death experience like 6 months ago. And they gave him psychotropic drugs. He was a computer engineer. He couldn't work. He was just spaced out on these drugs. And he said, and he told me about his experience. And I said, you don't need these drugs. You had a near-death experience. This is what it's like. These are the after effects. This is a gift. You can learn lots about it, and, you know, helped him get resources. And he went back to the VA and told them to get him off the drugs. And like 6 months later, he had a job, he was working. All he needed was support. And this is the crime of all of it, because these young men who are committing suicide already have so much trauma.
Right.
And then to have some experience that nobody can explain to them. And this isn't a costly, you know, problem. I was in the Army when they discovered combat stress at the time. And, you know, we went through all kinds of things to try to isolate that and help with it. With a near-death experience, you just need some people around who can explain it, who know what they're talking about. And it's, you know, I've found in the lectures I've gone to all over the world, one lady said, and this always struck me, she said, oh, you're just a normal person. You're a nurse. And, you know, I have a PhD. So when they introduced me, and she said, oh my God, you're a doctor. I thought some woo-woo person was going to come out. I said, no, I'm going to just tell you normal things you can do to be helpful about this. And it's such a personal experience. Like my nephew actually is a near-death experiencer. And I identified it when he was maybe 18 months old.
Wow. Yeah.
And my sister-in-law is a psychiatric nurse clinician, thank goodness. My brother sort of thought, oh yeah, whatever, you know. But as he grew up, I said, you're going to have to do different things. Near-death experiencers don't like bright lights, they don't like loud noises, and they don't like violence. And all your kids, all your boys play hockey. He will not want to do that, and you need to be receptive to whatever it is he wants to do. And when he was about 10, he wanted to be a scuba diver, which is very, very complicated. I have my license, and I thought 10 years old, he did it. He was fine. He's very, very intelligent, and ended up going to the Navy's nuclear prop, because I said, you got to find something that challenges him. So, you know, the violence and the bright lights, men come back. They used to love boxing, can't do it anymore. So it definitely changes your life. It also changes your relationship with your family, because these men go away to war. The wives expect them to come back, be the same people. And these people who have had near-death experiences look at love differently. They've experienced unconditional love. Their relationships are different. Their feelings about money are different. Many of them want to do not-for-profits and not so interested in making a lot of money. You know, and definitely they could not stay in the military with the violence. It just wouldn't work for them.
Right, right. Well, the idea that that they could maybe serve it, like you were talking about the computer skills, the guy that had, you know, they could serve in another way, non-combat. and still serve if they wanted to. But I think what you're saying is there's a huge often there's a huge chance that their personality totally changes. And
Yes.
that's a disruptive factor. And that's not PTSD, where PTSD
That's right.
is fear. This is love. It's almost the polar
Opposite.
opposite.
Yeah, it is all about love, and they're all about love, and they're wanting to be compassionate. They want to help people. I've seen a young man who had a job. He, on his way home, he saw this homeless mother and her child, and he gave them his paycheck. And so, well, his wife wasn't too excited about that, but I get it. You really feel, I feel this. We have to give back to the world. We have to hold the love and the concern and the sympathy. And right now the world is in chaos.
Right.
And it's more important than ever that we allow these people to have the presence that they need. And the military should have people there with the right support and the right education. They could reassign people and still get
Right.
great work out of people, because they're very dedicated to whatever they're doing. And but they have to know what's going on with them so they can really use that to their own advantage.
Right. Knowledge is power. Well, last year, I know, maybe both last year and the year before, you taught a class, you and Debbie taught a class that gave continuing education credits for nurses. So the nurses are interested in this. They're seeing this happen, and they want to be in service and help. So do you feel that that's starting to gain momentum, teaching the nurses?
Yeah, I think it is, and we're going to do something special next year for that. Excuse me. Nurses know about it. They just might not know what to do about it. And so it's really important you give them some tools and some information that they can share with people, some resources for help if they need it. I'm always available, and I get lots of email that will say, I had this and this and this experience. What do you think's happening to me on my webpage? And a lot of times they just need to know you had a near-death experience, you're fine, it's going to be okay, here's some articles. And now there's such a plethora of information. I mean, you know, there's videos, there's movies, there's books, and the resources are everywhere. And it's a very, this fix isn't going to cost a lot. It's simply information. And I've always said I'd be willing to go out there and teach any group of people, because for my mission is to just spread the word and be able to help people help others.
Well,
and I think
see it as a gift instead of a torture. I mean, the thing, well, seriously, the people go to another place where they see there isn't an angry God sitting on a throne judging them, that they're judging themselves, and come back going, oh, I'm going to do better. And they don't have the fear of that shame, blame, whatever you want to call that.
They have a certain percentage of people have what's called a life review, and they see themselves, if they were a bully, they're going to experience it from the other person's emotion. So they're going to feel the pain that they felt. And most people do come back with that, and they come ready to do helpful things and really be supportive of people. It's really important with children in the military because neither of them have good advocates. The parents don't realize it all the time. I was doing an interview with a journalist, and I was telling him about the characteristics. And he said, "Oh, I have a son that's very special. And every time we take a walk at night, the overhead lights go out." Well, near-death experiencers have electrical connections.
Yeah.
And they can, as PMH said one time, she threw out a whole room of computers and they just stopped. And when we were in Georgetown, we had a big conference. The entire hotel system, computer system went down.
Oh my gosh.
And we're all looking around like, oh, we don't know what happened. We don't know anything. But it's an after effect and you have to learn to control it.
Wow.
So here's this man, and he went on to tell me some other things. His son was an experiencer, but he didn't realize it. And, sometimes you just have to, from the after effects, help people understand what those are and how they'll affect their life, because they're going to be different than they were before.
Yep.
And it's really important, especially with children, to provide information and knowledge because they're going to be so smart. My nephew, when he was just young, taught himself to play the piano, taught himself to play the guitar, went through high school, went to college, was bored, taking all this calculus and stuff. And I said, you have got to find him something challenging. And, he ended up in a program that is very top secret and very challenging.
Yeah.
And today he's out of the Navy. And, he's back in school doing some computer design stuff and has been offered several jobs. But he is still the sweetest, nicest, kindest guy. And, people take advantage of that in young people if you're not familiar with it. So I've always sort of guided him in terms of relationships when he was at a teenage vulnerable part. And I think that's true for adults because all these combat survivors have got so many problems, and the VA, it doesn't really address them the way they need to. And the NDE is just something on the top, which they don't even recognize or know what to do with. And so the more we can teach people, that's why at the conference, we offer all disabled vets, all military who have had NDEs free access to the conference. And we have a special group. And I do a group once a month with ISCO where we get military people in to just talk. They can share their experiences because years later, they're still dealing with the after effects, with their differences. And they a lot of times continue to have spiritual experiences or out-of-body experiences, which is normal. But they don't know that unless you tell them and support them in that.
I think a lot of people have had spiritually transformative experiences, which are called STEs. That and I imagine a lot of the people that have had NDEs continue because once that door is open, then they have a lot. And what I find, I had one 18 years ago, and I wake up every morning still seeing it, and start my day that way. So
it's just like it happened yesterday.
Yes.
No, it's not something. That's the thing that's different than mental illness or other kinds of things. Hallucinations, they go on, they're very chaotic. All the attributes of the near-death experience, the characteristics are similar all over the world, and the after effects also. And these people are really touched at the source about this for the rest of their life.
Right, right.
And so, as you said, you wake up every morning thinking about that, and so do experiencers.
That's right.
And imagine children who have no idea why they feel the way they do, or without some guidance, it's difficult for them, because in school they're going to be strange, and they're going to be smarter than the teacher probably,
right.
And it makes it difficult without some help.
Yeah, I know. I don't know if I had a near-death experience at 2 weeks old, but I was aware of a lot of things that my siblings weren't aware. I remember at 8 years old. So I know, and you just clammed up because you were afraid to put you away. If really truly back then they did. There was no words for it. And the other part is, when you're a child, you don't realize that no one else sees the world like you do. So you try to share, and then if you get rejected, you just pull back.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's like imaginary friends. They're not imaginary. They're little spirits,
and they
that
are
have
friends.
come to visit, and they become friends with these. And I talked to a little girl who had had a near-death experience, and I said, well, what have you learned? And she was, I don't know, 5 or 6 or 7. She was young. I said, do you have friends? She said, oh, I have a friend who's an angel. I said, you do? And she said, yes. And she teaches me all kinds of things. She taught me about fairies. She taught me how to talk to animals. I have chickens that sit on my lap and we talk. And she problem solves for me. And these parents were smart. They even set a place at the table for Alice, I think her name was, the angel. And I mean, parents unfortunately don't listen to these kids, and they need to, and adults, because that's why there's no relationship between mental illness and a near-death experience. And we've got to learn that PTSD is a totally separate subject, and we just have to do better. And that's my journey, and I'm sticking to it.
So, Diane, could you give the audience a little bit of information also about your report that you did with Johns Hopkins in Voices? Could you talk about
that?
Yes.
We were asked to write an article for Johns Hopkins for the NIB, which is a journal on ethics. And we gave them 13 cases of near-death experiences. Then myself and Lilia Samoa wrote an article on the gap of care. Why aren't people treating this? And then an ethicist wrote an article, and a clergy wrote an article, all saying it was unethical not to treat this like any other thing.
Wow.
And they ended up making it once in a while, they pick a subject and they made a journal out of it that has all 13 cases, all the articles, some educational tools. It would be a wonderful thing. And since it comes out of Johns Hopkins, it certainly has validity to use as an educational tool. And you can get a hold of them from the NIB or from our office. I think we have some there for sale. So they're available, and it would be a great tool to start an educational program.
Yes, that's a lot of credibility. And you can see times are changing, that they wanted to put their name behind your work. That's fabulous. But when you think about it, IANDS, which is the International Association for Near-Death Studies, has been in existence for 40 years, and it's filled with research as well as experiencers. So the research part of it is quite rigorous. Well, depending on the researcher, it seems like everybody has a different formula, but the research is rigorous, and there are the standard, just like you said, there are characteristics that can be used to define what a near-death experience. So Diane, when did you get involved with IANDS first?
Very early, right in the beginning, because I was searching for somebody who knew something about these experiences. So it was the early 70s. I heard about this group at the University of Connecticut, and Nancy Bush was working there at the time, who has been a long time person in IANDS and an experiencer. And so I got involved at that time, joined, and have been involved ever since. I've been to all 40 annual conferences except one when I was
fantastic.
Sick. Yeah. And, we've come a long way from meeting in somebody's house, trying to figure out what are the guidelines to help somebody, to the thousands of books that have been written now, and movies, and it's everywhere. You almost have to be living under a stone not to know at least what it is. You might not know a lot about it, but and so, that's why we continue to do these conferences. 50% of the people are usually brand new to IANDS. So, once again, you're spreading the word. And they're phenomenal. This will be our first conference in person in a long time. So the energy is going to be right up there with all these new experiencers, and it'll be great to see everybody.
Well, one of the reasons why I'm a volunteer for IANDS and have been, I think this is my 5th year. And one of the reasons I love it is the heart opening experience of being with these people. Everyone wants to talk and process their experience. That was fascinating, that someone would just stop you in the hall and have to tell you that you didn't even know about their experience. But the heart, these people are cracked wide open, and they're totally in service and want to make a difference. But walking into a room of 300 people like that is starting a wave, I think, as part of our, hopefully, as part of this change that we're going through in the earth, this time change, where hopefully we're going to a more peaceful time and a more compassionate and equitable time in our history. So I was going to share the press release. Is that okay right now?
Sure,
okay.
Sure.
Okay. So let me share. So Diane, do you want to speak to this?
Yes, this is about the military discussion group we have at the conference. And it's, as I said, it's free for disabled vets and military NDEers, because we want a safe place where they can come and just describe their experiences. We have had many, many first timers get up in a room and you could hear a pin drop, and they might have had their experience 30 years ago, but they will start crying in telling the experience again. It is so personal, so emotional, and so important that we have a place for people to do that. And I even had one soldier that's come several years, and he can't come this year. And he said, can you please find a way to zoom me in to the military discussion group? I want to be there. And so it's a wonderful, wonderful place to do that and to learn. The conference is free also, the whole conference for these people. And you can learn everything you need to know about it at that time.
Right. This is a huge gift And the opportunity for us to honor the people that have basically sacrificed their lives for our country, and they need our support as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's really, really important. And the more soldiers and sailors and Marines and Coast Guard, all these folks that we can get to come and share their experience. And it's difficult for them to do this because it's so personal. So we really need to help them and encourage them and make things available for them. And I'm always available at the conference for people who want to talk personally too,
yeah.
to get support.
So I want to make sure people can read the fine print on here. The conference itself is August 31st to September 4th in Salt Lake City. And if you can't come in person, they are live streaming. And that is what I'm hoping is that from doing these interviews that you'll want to live stream and learn. The live streams are available for 180 days afterwards. So you don't have to spend your whole weekend glued to the computer to watch everything, but you can get the benefit of these stories, and these people's journey is just magnificent, right, Diane?
It's I once invited, I recognized at a Vietnam reunion that this patient was an experiencer. I invited him, he didn't know it. And I mean, there were all kinds of red flags. He came to the conference with his wife, and he came out with this load of books. And he just said, this conference, the people have changed my life.
Mm-hmm.
Life will be so much better now and so much easier. And he was just so appreciative just for the exposure. All he needed was some exposure.
To not be alone. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the thing, is that when you hear other people's articulation of their experience, you definitely get the words that you did not have.
Even if you weren't an experiencer, after listening to these people, you get the whole thing about an afterlife. You don't have to be afraid, because so many people are afraid of dying.
Right.
And you get all that, and it's phenomenal by listening to all these people. And and then you can go on, there's lots of resources. I have lots of lectures on YouTube, and it's so important. The only problem you'll have is you might get too many hugs at one of these conferences.
Well, again, you won't feel alone, and you won't feel, you'll start to have better language for expressing and feel safe expressing, and that there's some sort of huge heart opening. That's all I can explain. I mean, I don't do that many conferences, but I won't miss. You've done all 40, but this is, I think, well, the last two were online, so this will be my fourth or fifth one maybe. I don't know. Anyway,
once it gets into your heart, it
feels like home.
Yeah.
If you've had a spiritually transformative experience or near-death experience, and you're around these other people, a quantity of other people that also had it, it feels like home.
That's what I tell people.
Yes.
Come to this conference. You will have a home there. You have a place, and you have an organization. You don't have to think that somebody won't believe you. Everybody knows what an NDE is, and they're just there to support you.
Right. And encourage you. So I want to make sure people realize what this image that's on the screen, the date is Saturday, September 3rd, 10:15 a.m. to 12:15 p.m. So it's all day. Oh no, it's to noon. So 2 hours, Veterans and Military Free Discussion Group. So
Yeah,
one of
it's free to everybody.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
fantastic. So Diane, what is your hope for the future? I mean, we're going into these big changing times. What is your hope that all of this work that you've done, your life's work, what would you like the audience to know that you
I hope that, you know, in spreading the word and getting it out there, that there'll be support for NDEers, that we'll start to see changes in the education system, that nursing schools will have this in their curriculum. Hopefully, when I went to nursing school, there wasn't anything about death and dying. Well, now they have that, and this is certainly something that should be part of that discussion. In medical schools, in clergy, all places where their job is to support people. And I hope that people in general will get to know about it and know the wonderful gifts that come from the near-death experience. And I think a lot of people haven't been able to use these gifts because they're kind of afraid.
right.
And we can help them with that, because there's some wonderful things that happen. And just a calmer, more loving world. If you come to an IANDS conference, it models what we'd like to see in the rest of the world. People being caring, loving, reaching out to you, and just sharing openly. It's a beautiful thing. And not a lot of other places you're going to see that kind of love actualized,
Right.
really. And I hope the world will start to behave that way.
I think so too. The other thing that I wanted people to realize is that once people are nurtured to see the blessings that they've had from their near-death experience, rather than be frightened by it, most of these people are overachievers afterwards. You mentioned that with the children, that they're really smart, but I mean, that's the other message of don't be afraid of life. Don't be afraid to show up. I mean, our conditioning with being afraid of lots of things because of religion or culture, all of that isn't necessary for us to use.
That's exactly true. And all these people, a lot of them come back and do not-for-profit work. Many NDEers are hospice volunteers, and, you know, go into different professions. That is one of the after effects. People who worked on Wall Street become respiratory therapists or something else, because they're just looking to give back to the world.
Yeah, I think there's that nurturing side, that switch gets turned on, and how
It does.
you have service, and the service aspect of it is it's an opportunity to give and receive at the same time, and learn at the same time. So that's the other thing. I haven't seen that many egos. Really, you know, when you go to conferences like this where there's over 100 speakers, there a lot of times you'll see someone strutting their stuff. Well, I have never seen that. I've never seen. Everyone seems to be kind and loving and want to make a difference, want to contribute to making the world a better place, and are so delighted to be in group.
Oh, yeah. And we have several physicians, some of which are experiencer, and they are the same way. Many of them have given up their careers to just go out and teach. And a few never believed in this before it happened to them, and have seen, I mean, there's incredible stories about people having an experience, learning that they had an adopted sister that they never knew about.
Wow.
children identifying grandparents or great-grandparents that they saw in heaven and they've never met, seen a picture of, knew anything about. I mean, there's a lot of things that are convincing, especially with me. That's what put me over the edge in the beginning was children. They just tell you the truth. I died, I went to heaven, I met God, you know, and so on.
The other thing I wanted people to know is that the people that are, if some of the keynotes have been there before, or they've told their story before, they don't present the same materials every year. Some conferences you go to and it's like, oh, I already saw them. They're just going to talk about the same thing again. These people are very, at least I'm going to show the screen. These people have wonderful they're not letting grass grow between their feet, underneath their feet. They're presenting new things over and over again. These are the keynotes. And the theme is timeless oneness, the luminous message of near death and other spiritually transformative experiences. So we have these illuminated people. Do you want to say anything about anybody here?
Well, Suzanne Giesman, who is a medium, years ago, when I was president, we didn't have mediums because I was afraid it was a little too far out there. But then at some point, when somebody loses a child, the only way to heal them is to be able to contact them on the other side. Susan was a military officer, a Navy officer at a very high station, and her daughter was electrocuted, and her daughter was pregnant at the time. And she was desperate. She didn't know anything about NDEs or mediumship, but she was desperate to find a way to communicate with her. So she went to the school in London, all the great mediums, and she has become a really, really successful medium. I think her waiting list is like 4 years long. And I actually have been training under her for the last couple of years.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I'm practicing being a medium.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah, and she is wonderful, the kindest, caring person, and does a lot of work with parents who have lost children.
Yeah.
And there's just no way to, say how wonderful that is. And like Mark Anthony, he's a lawyer, but he spends his time giving answers to people from the other side. Can you contact the other side? Absolutely. I have been able to do that, and I'm as shocked as anybody when it happens. And so they're just wonderful, really loving, caring people, and I think anybody would just have a great time.
Right. And I've gotten to interview quite a few of these people this past week and a half. It's been fascinating, really. We're so lucky. We're so lucky as a nonprofit that this.
Oh, to have them. PMH has written like 9 books.
No, she's almost to her 20th.
Is she? Oh my God. The woman is unstoppable, and she had 3 near-death experiences during childbirth, and was told she had to write some books, and so she wrote those, and then she has written more, and wonderful books on children, after effects, all kinds of things. She's a very prolific writer, and she'll be there for sure.
Yeah. And she said she's coming with her husband. So she said, I can't wait to introduce you. So she's so joyful, and she's in her 80s. So
oh yeah,
I mean,
she's been around from the beginning.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying is that these people, when you meet them, each one of them is playing a part in making the world a better place. and sharing their knowledge, but that you can see that the aptitude for this is not Netflix.
Yeah.
This is a lot higher intelligence sharing because of the research and the thoroughness of people's presentations. There's panels. There's all sorts of ways that you can learn. Some of the panels have 4 people with a moderator and 3 other people. So you hear 4 stories in 1 hour. So it's amazing. And each one of these people have opened my eyes and my heart. So I'm hoping people will come, and I'm hoping that you reach more military participants.
I hope so. Please come up and introduce yourself if you come to the conference. I'd love to talk to you.
Great. Well, see you soon, Diane. Thank you so much.
Next week, we'll be there.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.